Friends, in this video, we'll discuss a well-known Indian poet, DILIP CHITRE, and his widely read poem, The House of My Childhood. Well, DILIP CHITRE was born in Baroda, Gujarat in 1938, and he was a foremost Indian poet and critic of the post-independence period in India. Well, he wrote in two languages, in Marathi as well as in English. Now, besides being a poet, he was also a painter, a translator, a fiction writer, and a filmmaker. He started producing films from 1969. Well, in the year 2009, DILIP CHITRE died of cancer. Remember, most of his poems are autobiographical, and for the same reason, they are highly nostalgic. This particular poem, The House of My Childhood, is very strongly autobiographical and highly nostalgic. The poem is set in the background of his ancestral home in Baroda, and he recollects his past memories that were imprinted on his mind. Well, coming to the poem, The House of My Childhood, remember it's a very short poem of 18 lines, arranged in 3 stanzas. The first stanza consists of 5 lines, the second one 8, and a third one 5 lines. Let's take a look at the poem. The house of my childhood. The house of my childhood stood empty on a grey hill, all its furniture gone except my grandmother's grindstone and the brass figurines of her gods. After the death of all birds, bird cries still fill the mind. After the city's erasure, a blur still peoples the air. In the colorless crack that comes before morning, in a place where nobody can sing, words distribute their silence among intricately clustered glyphs. My grandmother's voice shivers on a bare branch. I toddle around the empty house. Spring and summer are both gone, leaving an elderly infant to explore the rooms of age. Well, this is the poem. Let's take a closer look at the poem. Here's the first stanza. The house of my childhood stood empty on a grey hill, all its furniture gone, except my grandmother's grindstone and the brass figurines of her gods. Well, remember, Chitre was born in Baroda, what is today known as Vadodara. You know, Vadodara, the name is very significant. The name Vadodara means the heart of the banyan tree, which is very dear to the Hindus. According to the Hindu view of life, the banyan tree is the giver of life, and it is a divine, a holy tree. Well, Chitre was born in Vadodara in 1938. And remember, in the year 1951, at the age of 13, they were shifted from Baroda to Mumbai. And after a long time, Chitre pays a visit to the grandmother's house. This is the occasion. Well, when he reaches his grandmother's house, the ancient house, well, the house was still there on top of a hill. Well, in his younger days, when they were living there, it was completely green. The place was completely green, filled with the trees, birds, their songs, and all those things. Now, this time when he visits the home, the place was completely changed. The green hill on the top of which the house stands, the green hill has turned grey. The house, of course, it is an old house, an ancient house, that's also completely changed. There are no trees, there are no birds, no songs. Well, this is the result of modernization. The city has changed. The ancient city has become modern city. Trees were felled. There is no green. It is a concrete jungle. So, look at the poem. The house of my childhood stood empty on a grey hill. In the past, the hill was green. Now the hill has turned grey. The house of my childhood stood empty. Well, it was a rich house. In my younger days when we were living there, it was a rich house. It was full of furniture, well, forms, statues of gods and goddesses, and there was life everywhere. It was a home. Now it is completely empty because they have already shifted to Mumbai. So all the furniture, everything inside the house has been shifted. Now the house of my childhood stood empty. Nothing is inside. There is nothing inside the house. It is totally empty. On a grey hill. The hill has become grey because there are no trees. It is a grey hill. An old house on a grey hill. And all its furniture gone. And all its furniture gone. Except, so everything is gone except what? My grandmother's grindstone. My grandmother, she was a highly religious and pious woman. She used a pan, and for preparing the pan, she used a grindstone. So that grindstone is still there in the house. Except my grandmother's grindstone and the brass figurines of her gods. Well, the little statues, the little forms in brass and bronze, the statues of gods and goddesses. Well, these things can be found there. So these are the only things that can be found in the house now. What? The grandmother's grindstone and the brass figurines of her god. These are the only things left in the home now. The home, the house that stands on a grey hill. Well, that's the first stanza. Now take a look at the second stanza. After the death of all birds, bird cries still fill the mind. The birds are no more because the city has changed. The green hill has become grey hill. And well, there were a lot of trees. It was completely green in those days. Now it has become a concrete jungle. So the birds have disappeared. After the death of all birds, bird cries still fill the mind. Well, the birds have disappeared, but still the poet can still hear the birds' songs in his mind. The song of the birds that he used to hear in his childhood when he was living here. So he can still hear the song of birds in his mind. After the city's erasure, the city has been erased. The city has been wiped out. Because the ancient city, the old city has given way to the new city. After the city's erasure, a vague, smoky image is still there. A blur still peoples the air. Well, in his mind's eye, he can still see blurred images of the old people, the ancient people, the people whom he used to see, he used to meet in his childhood. Blurred images he can still see in his mind's eye. In the colorless crack that comes before morning. Well, just before dawn, just before the day starts, just before the sun appears in the eastern horizon. Well, it is colorless at that time. And, gradually it becomes, the eastern horizon, becomes filled with varied hues, varied shades, varied colors when the sun appears there. In the colorless crack that comes before morning, in a place where nobody can sing. Well, nobody can sing now here. Nobody sings here. In this house, because there is no one. There is no one in the house. Nobody sings. Nobody can sing. It is completely desolate. There is complete emptiness. Nobody is there. Well, in a place where nobody can sing, Words distribute their silence. It is completely silent. There is no song, there is no conversation, there is no smile, there is no laughter, nothing there. Words distribute their silence among intricately clustered glyphs. It is like the hieroglyphics, the ancient writings, the picture writings, which it is very, very difficult for us to understand. Intricately clustered glyphs, you can't make out anything, because all these figures and letters and these things, they are completely vague, they are indistinct. Nothing can be made out, nothing can be understood. It is completely vague, like smoke like. Look at the third stanza. My grandmother's voice shivers on a bare branch. I toddle around the empty house. Spring and summer are both gone, leaving an elderly infant to explore the rooms of age. My grandmother's voice, well, my grandmother is gone. She is no more. She is dead. But still, when he goes into the house, he can still hear the voice of his grandmother. Where? Where can he hear the voice of the grandmother? My grandmother's voice shivers on a bare branch. When he looks at one of the branches of the trees, well, the branch is completely dried. There is no leaf. There is no bird. And when he looks at the branch, well, he can see that the branch shivers. And in the shivering of the branch, he can hear the voice of his grandmother. The voice shivers on a bare branch. I toddle around. I walk around. Well, in my younger days, when I was a child, I used to walk around. I used to walk with great difficulty. I used to walk around my house as a child. Now, when I walk around the house now, well, I remember the days when I used to walk around. I used to toddle around the house as a child. I toddle around the empty house. In those days, the house was full. It was full of people. Now it is empty. I used to toddle around the house in those days, well, in happiness and cheerfulness, with great joy. But now I'm really sad. My mind is filled with memories, nostalgia. Spring and summer are both gone. Well, along with my grandmother, the seasons have also disappeared. There is no spring, there is no summer, there is no autumn, there is no winter. Spring and summer are both gone, leaving an elderly infant. Well, in my mind, I am still an infant, but now I am a grown-up man. Elderly infant, leaving an elderly infant to explore the rooms of age, to see whether I can see anything inside the house. Well, this is the poem. Now, when you take a closer look at the poem, you can see that, it is just like a block of cheese filled with recollections, filled with memories, and filled with nostalgia. Very thick nostalgia. Now, the grandmother here is likened to a tree, which can be identified as a banyan tree, because in the ancient house where he was born and spent his childhood, there was a banyan tree. A banyan tree was there. Well, his father insisted on, pulling down the tree because he thought it posed a lot of problems. Whereas his grandmother objected. She said no. She was highly religious and pious. So she said, no, it should not be done. The banyan tree should not be removed. It should not be pulled down. But, well, his father was very strong. He was very powerful. And so his decision was implemented. It was pulled down. Whereas his grandmother said, no, it should not be removed because it is blasphemy. It is a sacrilegious act. No, it is an unholy act. Now, it's a sin to pull down a banyan tree. But remember, as a coincidence, the banyan tree was removed And these people, the family was relocated. They had to move away from there. Maybe, who knows, a believer, a strong believer in God would say, well, this is nemesis at work. They had to relocate themselves to another place, that is Mumbai. And Chitre has written another poem, The Felling of the Banyan Tree, in which he tells about, all these things. Now, when you look at the character of grandmother, grandmother was a very religious, pious, and God-fearing woman, as we have seen. She was a truly traditional character. She used a grindstone to prepare a pan, which is, a combination of, betel leaf, arecanut, rose water, and such fragrant spices. The brass figures, the brass forms of gods and goddesses, the small statues of Hindu gods used by the grandmother are still present in the house. The poet says that, the grandmother's voice, it can still be heard where on a bare branch of a tree. When the grandmother is gone, the seasons have also disappeared. Well, this, it points to the climate change, due to deforestation, due to the felling of indiscriminate felling of trees, deforestation. The grandmother was a lover of nature, maybe a pantheist, a person who finds the presence of God in each and every object of nature. She believed that trees are really sacred, and felling trees is a crime as well as a sin. There is also a deep sense of rootlessness which can be seen in the poem, resulting from the family's relocation. The family was relocated from Baroda to Mumbai in the year 1951. So now when you look at the poem in this way, you can see that it is filled with remembrances, nostalgia, love of nature, his criticism of the indiscriminate modernization drive, the urbanization, and all these things. Now, when you consider all these things, you can see that it is a really marvelous poem. So that's it. Now, as usual, I have uploaded the notes here. You can find the links of the PDF version. So thank you very much. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much. See you.